Good evening, Flagstaff, and welcome back to another Live Black Experience Community Dialogue. Tonight, we're talking about Black Panther, the breakout 2018 Marvel Cinematic Universe feature that stands out as a uniquely Black narrative in both the MCU and the broader cultural landscape. We'll be looking at the message of the film and its unique cultural impact in perfect timing ahead of the wide release of Black Panther Wakanda Forever next week. This evening, we'll be hearing from Dr. Frederick W. Gooding, aka Dr. G. Dr. G holds the Dr. Ronald E. Moore Professorship in Humanities in the John V. Roach Honors College. Dr. G critically analyzes race within mainstream media, effectively contextualizing problematic patterns based upon their historical roots. As such, his best known work thus far is You Mean There's Race in My Movie, the complete guide to understanding race in mainstream Hollywood, which has been utilized in high schools and universities nationwide. Also, the co editor of Stories from the Front of the Room: How Higher Education Faculty Overcome Challenges and Thrive in the Academy. Dr. G has stayed focused on the practical applications of equity with his 2018 book, American Dream Deferred, carefully detailing the growth and struggles of Black federal workers in the post war era. One of his latest works, Black Oscar from May 2020, expands his reach into cultural studies by analyzing African American Academy Award winners and how their narratives reflect and reinforce larger American history. Welcome, Dr. G.
Thank you. And I'm really appreciative of everyone who's tuning in or listening. There are many things that you can do, but the idea that we are sharing this time is very special. And so I'm very appreciative. I would also just like to shout out all my freedom fighters out there in Flagstaff. It's not easy, but the work is worth it. And I just want to encourage everybody out there who's fighting the good fight. And lastly, before I begin my remarks, I would just also like to say, rest in peace to Takeoff. He's the latest of, name that we've been adding to this list of people who have left us too soon. And unlike Chadwick Boseman, who died of natural causes, the Takeoff scenario, I think we can classify it as unnatural causes. And, I think, while it's so very, sad, I think that, this conversation tonight, is timely in that it gives us something positive to look forward to, because maybe this idea of paradise doesn't have to be fantasy, right? Wakanda doesn't necessarily have to be fantasy. The question is, what can we do to reconcile and deal with the powers that be, and also figure out the healthy ways to love one another, so that we can move forward in time, because we are a mighty people, we are strong people, and again, it's one of these deals where my hope is we will definitely improve upon in time. So with that being said, I just want to say that the timing is quite uncanny, that we actually have this right before the next week's showing of Wakanda Forever, the sequel to Black Panther. And so for those of you who were in Flagstaff roughly 4 years ago when it came out, I want to be very clear in stating that, I was very, very, very excited when the movie came out. And in fact, when I was teaching at Northern Arizona University, arranged for us to rent out the whole entire movie theater, to share with, the experience. And, that was pretty tame compared to some of the accounts that I read and heard about, as far as people bringing drums and food to the theater. A lot of people were so very excited. And I think one of the questions is, well, why? I mean, why is it one of these? I mean, it's just a movie, right? No, it was more than just a movie. It was a signature event. And I think part of the reason why is because if you're into superheroes, at least with a blackface, right? In the movie realm, I mean, the most we had up until that point was, no disrespect, right? When someone says no disrespect, disrespect's about to come. But no, I really do mean no disrespect. I think the only black superheroes we had up until that time on the movie screen was, no disrespect, Meteor Man. Y'all remember that? Robert Townsend, Meteor Man. Y'all remember that one? Wow. Yeah. Well, if you haven't seen it, I wouldn't go rush to go see it, but do check it out, and I think that you'll see why there was so much pent up excitement. I mean, I might be forgetting a couple others, but I mean it's a short list, right? I mean, I think Damon Wayans was in one, but I don't know if that movie could be shown in theaters today. I think it was based upon one of his characters from Living Color, where I can't recall the name. But in terms of superhero, right? It's just a very, very short list. It really is. And that's part of the struggle we're talking about, that when you look at least African Americans, and other people of color as well, but the relationship with Hollywood has been checkered, spotty, if not flat out problematic, right? In terms of when you look at the history of Hollywood, the first film, right, that they say is like the godfather of all modern day film, mainstream movies, is Birth of a Nation, 1915, D.W. Griffith. If you've seen the movie, do you know it's highly problematic because you have literally, that's the British pronunciation, you literally have white men riding in on high horses to save a white damsel in distress from black men. White men in blackface. So obviously that's patently offensive. Then when you look at the first talking picture, 1927, The Jazz Singer, you're talking about a white Jewish male in blackface. Again, patently offensive. But here's the best part. These movies I just mentioned to you are shown every year in every film school because they're history. They're part of film history, right? And this is not to mention the bevy of other films in black and white and in color that absolutely flat out disparaged and demeaned all aspects of black culture, in life, right? If anything, it says more about the makers of these movies. I mean, I've limited resources, but if I'm making a movie, I'm not spending all my time making fun of and putting other people down, right? I mean, I just don't have time for that, right? If anything, I'm gonna make a movie about something that's interesting to me. But at any rate, Hollywood has a very long history of making films that are quite unflattering to the black image. So I think that, in concert with what? Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I thought of another person. Lando Calrissian, as you all know, Billy D. Williams. There you go. Yep, Ms. Bernadine. There you go. He also was a black man in space, right? Even though he quote unquote sold out the Rebel Alliance to Darth Vader. Okay, but the point though is, many people were excited about Black Panther. And so what I wanted to do was lay out a couple of thoughts and then take some questions at the end. But I also want to be very, very clear at the very beginning of this talk in saying that that I am a professor, and so I teach people to think critically, and so as a result, I want to do fair warning that even though I was very excited about Black Panther and I'm very much excited to see Wakanda Forever next week, I do have a couple comments about the first movie, right? I haven't seen the second movie yet, but I do have a couple of comments about the first movie. So I believe that in the name of dialogue and discourse, it's all fair game, it's all legal, it's all fair. So if I have a critique, it's not to say I don't like Black people and I'm against Black people. No, I mean, my father always taught me, beware the coach with nothing to say. So because my grandmother loved me, because my mother loved me, they would, provide me with feedback, if you would, right? And that's how, I've been able to get to this point. Maybe if I listen to them, I might be in the movies myself. But the point is, what I want to do is take this time with, my comments to talk about 9 lies that I think the Black Panther movie debunked. And again, Cat has 9 lives, so I thought 9 lies might, get us in the neighborhood. Okay, all right, let's go ahead and get going. So, number 1 lie is that Black movies don't make any money. Well, no, you have to remember that. Remember, what is it? PBP, pre-Black Panther, right? Many Hollywood studios were very skittish and were very reluctant to invest in movies. I mean, think about no, seriously. I mean, and you all can put it in the comments and chat. I can't see because of my screen right now, but I mean, just people just put out some names. Think about the movies that you know featuring majority Black cast, right? I.e., Black movies. First of all, that in and of itself is an issue. The idea that if I have two or more Black people in a movie, all of a sudden it's a Black movie, right? And so that in and of itself is a whole nother ball of wax, because once a movie is labeled as a quote unquote Black movie, it suffers. It usually has a lower production budget and also smaller distribution and also a smaller marketing budget, right? So those are the three key areas in which if you're labeled as a Black movie, you oftentimes suffer. So again, if you're shown in less theaters, mathematically, you're not in a position to compete, right? Or if you have a smaller, promotion budget, I mean, you think about your odds. Think about how for you and I might be a little bit more discriminating, but for many people, they show up to the theater on a Friday night and it's like, oh, okay, well, I think I heard about it. I'll go with this one. And so advertising makes a difference. And so up until that point, the other point I was trying to make was think about how many Black movies you know, whether it be Soul Food, Barbershop. These are all movies that are not high on special effects, not shot in faraway locations like Hawaii or anything of that nature, right? And it's usually relationship based, inside a home or inside one place. And so Black Panther was considered a risk because of this investment. Although technically, if we're keeping score at home, it was not a full risk because it's part of the Marvel universe. In fact, it was the 11th movie made within the Marvel comic universe. So if you're being cynical, you could say that, after trotting out all these other movies and seeing the formula, because remember, there's already built-in audience. It's not as if Black Panther was completely made up and no one heard about this, up until the year 2018. The comic book was started for a very long time. And even though the comic book may not have been at the popularity level, say Batman or Wonder Woman or Superman, the fact of the matter is there was a built-in audience, so that minimizes the risk for Hollywood. But that being said, the movie wasn't just successful, it was very successful. As in $1.2 billion successful, right? Absolutely incredible, right? And so here's the deal. You know how Hollywood is. Hollywood is not in the business of making art. They're in the business of making what? Money. So, oh snap, who knew? Right? Who knew that? Because again, let's think about it from this angle. And I still have to get to my other 8, but think of it from this angle, how this is all related. If anything, it's about damn time, excuse my French, because African Americans are, if anything, overrepresented at the box office. What do I mean? Well, most of the movies that you see at your local AMC 18 do not feature Black people in prominent roles. However, if you look very carefully at the box office receipts, you'll find that Blacks oftentimes make up 40% of the audience, in large metropolitan areas. And so 40% may not sound like a lot to some people, but it's a big number when you're talking about African Americans are roughly 13% of the population nationwide, maybe a little higher in areas such as Detroit, Washington, D.C., things of that nature. But the point of the matter is this: Hollywood has profited off of the patronage of African Americans, right? Who, because think about it. If you don't have, I'm out here in Dallas, the Fort Worth area, and I was just driving today. I was presenting at another conference earlier today, actually, in Frisco, Texas. And I was driving back and I saw this advertisement for Shen Yun, Chinese acrobatic troupe, right? So I was like, oh, that looks awesome. That looks interesting. Let me see if I can surprise my family for the holidays. I looked up the tickets, y'all. And for a family of four, and again, I'm talking about, this is not in the middle, this is not in the center, right? I'm talking about I'm on the side, where I got to get my kaleidoscope on, right? I'm on the side. And you know how much those tickets were? $5. So let me translate: over $500, right? Over $500, right? And I didn't talk about parking. I didn't talk about, obviously people got to eat, or anything, right? So in other words, it's expensive to go out to the theater, to go out. So for many African Americans, right, raising families, the movies are a more affordable alternative, right? So African Americans are overrepresented at the box office. So if anything, Hollywood investing in a movie like Black Panther was pastime, right? It was pastime. And and who knew? All of a sudden, it made money. It crossed over. Many whites also supported it as well. And so now there's this idea of, okay, well, now it's safe to invest in Black movies. So again, I think again, it's not an indictment on the Black Panther team, but it's really more an indictment on Hollywood on dragging their feet and taking so long to do this.
I'm introduce to y'all a new dance. It's called the money dance. You pull the money out your pocket like this. You put your hands in the air like this, and you simply just bounce, throw it all around, throw it all around, throw it all around, throw it all.
Okay, all right, we get the point. All right, it's making money. The number 2 lie, right? Black heroes are not marketable. Again, no disrespect. No disrespect, no disrespect, y'all. No disrespect. But I just don't recall. I mean, I'm dating myself. I was old enough, when the movie came out, and I just don't recall like seeing any of my colleagues with toys or T-shirts or I just don't recall. Meteor Man. I don't know. I don't know. I just don't recall. But flip the script over here. Not only is Black Panther proven profitable at the box office, but if you all were paying attention, it's also been featured in Super Bowl ads. Right. And if you all don't watch the Super Bowl, that's fine. Just about everybody else in the world does. And so ask somebody else at the local grocery store next time you're shopping, oh, have you seen the Super Bowl commercials? And they'll tell you, yes, and I love them. And Super Bowl commercials are not cheap. You're talking about roughly $3 to $5 million for 30 seconds, right? Because it is the most watched televised program on the planet. And if you're curious, the Oscars, by the way, are number 2, right? That's the subject of another book for another time. So the idea that Black people are not marketable is simply just untrue. Black people actually, last time I checked, are people. And so, it's so long as the storyline is good, so long as things look well and well put together, then I think other people will find other people interesting. I mean, at least that's the way I'm looking at it, right? As you all know, we are not that too far removed from a Jim Crow history where there were these narratives about anything Black was contaminated and less than, right? And so arguably we're still struggling with the aftermath of some of that, but clearly Black Panther has shown that this is an opportunity that maybe has been missed out upon, and we need to take seriously moving forward. So the third lie I would like to talk about or debunk is that Black movies can't handle big budgets. Remember what I was talking about earlier about the whole soul foods and barbershops, those type of movies. Those budgets typically in the realm of like $25 to $30 million, right? And if you don't believe me, look up your good friend and maybe your good friend Terrence Howard. You all remember him from Hustle and Flow. Yes, the movie that technically won an Oscar Academy Award for best song. Hustle and Flow. It's hard out there for a pimp. I'm sorry if there's children listening, but yes, that's what happened. But Terrence Howard will tell you that he only got paid like $4,000 for that movie, right? $4,000 for that movie. It was some abysmally like small amount of money. You would think, oh, he's in the movies and blah blah blah, but oftentimes, as I was saying earlier, these African American dominated productions just simply suffered from lower production investments from the studio, right? But with this one, we know that this is an absolutely concerted attempt to make the investment. And I think when Hollywood sees that the investment pays off, then there's a financial incentive to continue that type of behavior, right? And just by way of quick review, when I say Hollywood's a big business, it really is a big business. Does anyone know, just off the top, like the average cost of it to make a mainstream movie, like a mainstream movie, right? I'm not talking about made for Netflix or made for HBO or something like that. But I'm talking about just, nationwide release. You go to your local AMC and you're going to find it. Anyone know the average budget? What if I told you it was only $150 million, right? The average, right? And so for those of you who saw movies like Evan Almighty, I don't know if y'all saw that one. It was the sequel to Bruce Almighty, came out several years ago. If you did see it, I just want to offer my condolences first and foremost, if you saw that movie. But secondly, you'd be curious to know that the budget for that movie was only $250 million, right? So just think about what you and I could do with $250 million. I mean, I know there's always talk about the Powerball. I guess if you do win it after taxes, you probably would get roughly $250 million. But just think about what we could do, right? And this is after we pay our bills, right? After we pay our bills. I mean, in terms of just homelessness, hunger, education. I mean, you name it. That's just for one movie that nobody saw and it wasn't good, right? So Hollywood is big business. But remember what we were talking about earlier. But if you're able to flip 150 million into over $1 billion and still counting, right? Because think about how you're still counting, because now, since it was so successful, of course you want to do a sequel. I mean, who knows? I mean, they're on Fast and Furious Part 9 now, right? I mean, so who knows? I mean, our grandkids might be looking at Black Panther sequels or spinoffs or things of that nature, provided that is still, successful, right? Still successful. So, so if 150 million can, make you several billion, then yes. I mean, then you can see the mindset behind wanting to take that type of risk. And earlier when I talked about advertising, roughly on average, it takes about 30 million to market a movie effectively, right? We oftentimes take for granted how ubiquitous movie ads are, from bus stations to tie-ins with fast food chains, obviously commercials and print ads. But check this out, right? This is one of my favorites. This is a Bay Area rapid transit station in San Francisco. The Oakland, San Francisco area. And by the way, speaking of the director of this movie, Ryan Coogler, he also directed a movie entitled Fruitvale Station, based upon the unfortunate and sad true story of Brother Oscar Grant, who on New Year's Day, 2009, was shot dead, even though he was handcuffed, lying on his stomach. Right, that's a true story. So just 19 days before our first Black president was to be inaugurated, a brother was shot at a station. It's called Fruitvale Station. But at any rate, notice what they did at this Bay Area rapid transit station in terms of making the floor look like the water, painting the ceiling to look like the sky, all for Pirates of the Caribbean. I think this was episode 23. I can't keep up. And lastly, the other point I want to make is that when we say it's big business, is that a lot of people don't realize and take movies for granted, at least American Hollywood-made movies, right? For example, if you got on a plane right now and flew across the world to, say, New Zealand or Shanghai, first of all, that's probably how you would spend most of your time. If you weren't napping or, suffering, in coach, the idea is that you would probably be watching American movies, right? Yes, there would be some international, but I guarantee you that most of the movies you're going to see, available to you are going to be American Hollywood-made movies, right? And, a lot of people underestimate the global impact, especially when considering that American movies are the second leading export out of the United States behind aircraft, right? Yes. And so that is significant. So line number 4, Blacks can't be villains, only 2-bit thugs. So this one is a little bit, requires a little parsing out, right? And what I mean by this is that when I was referencing earlier some of Hollywood's history, many of the stereotypical roles that African Americans appeared in were essentially two-dimensional. I mean, if you saw us on screen, you just knew that it was bad news. Thereby, rising to the question, why is Black guy die first? Well, because when you see him or see her, I mean, their part is just not that significant, right? And so I think what was interesting is in this movie with Killmonger, that we actually are introduced to a black villain. And even though Killmonger was bad, and we'll talk about that in just a second. We'll talk about that in just a second. You know, why he was bad, or if he was bad, should I say. But my point is that very few movies have you seen in which the black character is complex or developed enough to even be a villain, right? Other than gun in the face and give me your jewels, and then that's the end of it. And then the crime fighters save the day and dispense of the black person. The idea is that Killmonger had a backstory, right? He had a reason, for why he was doing what he was doing. And so, I think, Black Panther, debunked this idea that we're just two-dimensional. And I think by having a character that was making decisions that, were questionable, right? Like, do you agree? Do you not, agree? That's all part of you now, or the audience now, being drawn in to the psyche of an individual who just happens to be African American, right? Because if you think about it, most times when you see African Americans on screen, very, very seldom is much time and attention spent on what we call interiority, right? In terms of how a person is thinking or feeling, right, on the inside. And movies do this in a number of different ways, whether they signal to you with music or close angle shots, or just think about like how you might watch a television show like was Grey's Anatomy or something. How many times have you seen in an ensemble show like Grey's Anatomy scenes filmed inside of the actual black person's home, right? Now, again, I understand with How to Get Away with Murder, but because Annalise Keaton was the main star, she was obviously in her home and famously would take off her makeup. But in terms of when you have blacks sharing the screen with whites, that's when the hierarchy develops, right? And whites get more the attention, time, and treatment. Sorry, that's just what happens. Email me if you think of a movie where it's not happening. And so number 5, black heroes aren't for everyone. Well, I guess maybe part of the concern, the only reason why we had like a singular Meteor Man was, especially back in the day, the concern from Hollywood was that, well, if we make a black star, only black people will see it, or it will only appeal to a mostly black audience. And therefore, we've already cut down the potential amount of profits that we can make. Why would we do that? Why would we shoot ourselves in the foot? And so if we make a movie like Superman or Captain Marvel, well, that's Captain Marvel is for everyone. White, blonde, female. The single white, blonde female living in my house. I could look, but I'm not gonna find. I mean, again, there's nothing wrong with white women. I work with them every day. They're in my classes and things of this nature. They invite me to their homes. I attend their grillings. Grillings. But the fact of the matter is that whenever you have like a white person in a superhero role, it's not a white superhero. It's just a superhero. It's just for everyone, right? Superman's for everyone, right? Thor, it's for everyone, right? Batman, he's for everyone, even though he's dressed in black. It's for everyone. So that's the concern. And so then, I mean, think about like how, all this controversy over what's going on right now, Lord of the Rings, you put a Afro-Latino elf, in there and like, oh my God, this is terrible. Just think about the reaction now. Even what was that other show on HBO, House of Dragon, right? Like, oh my God, what are you doing with the House of Valerian? So we had a similar reaction as well, right? And so some people just could not handle it. It's called cognitive dissonance. And again, excuse the vulgarity down there at the bottom, but this is how people are spending their time, right? This is how people are spending their time, right? And so, and again, it's not just from the land of the artistically ignorant, because that was a Photoshop job, but even from the intellectual intelligentsia, right? This idea, again, look at the phrasing, right? Should terrify. Really, okay, terrify, okay, sure. Why? Terrify. Okay. Right. But the fact of the matter is that I think when the box office demonstrates that a large audience was indeed interested and is hungry for more, that shifts matters a bit, right? It does shift matters a bit, right? So I think that this is hopefully an argument we'll be hearing less of as we move forward in time. All righty, now we're at number 6. Let's do a little bit more heavy lifting here, right? And again, it's a free country, so you are free to disagree with me, 100%. Although, if you tell me the Philadelphia world champion Eagles are not undefeated, then you're wrong about that. I'm so sorry. I had to slip it in. Fly, Eagle, fly, baby. We're undefeated, and so that's a fact. So you can't disagree with me on that. But if you want to disagree with me about what I have to say about Black Panther next, then it's all good, it's all fair, and I'm willing to engage in dialogue and with the questions. But the question is Black Panther a true superhero? Well, class. Again, I can't see right now, but if you can put in the chat or let me know when we open up for Q&A. Let's just do a review. So the mighty Thor has the hammer. Superman can fly, has X-ray vision and all the other good stuff. Green Lantern, has the ring. Okay. What would you say qualifies Black Panther as a superhero? Like, what are his super powers or skills, would you say? I mean, I'm talking about in the movie that we saw, because I've seen it a couple times, but in the movie, like, what did he do that was like, he did or when he whipped out what did he do that was, man, that's superhero. I mean, so it's a question, right? Because what's interesting is when it comes to power, the Dora Milaje, these sisters are about it, right? About it, right? And I can't wait to see them again. I'm looking forward to seeing them again next week. I was thinking about being the sister for Halloween, but I just couldn't figure out what to do with the curls. So I just but sister is powerful, right? Sister's powerful, okay. So, I just think that it's just a question, that I would like for us to, wrestle with a little bit, right? And what does it mean? What does it say? Because to stop beating around the bush, I think while maybe an analogy can be made that he's kind of similar to Batman. Batman is not technically a superhero in the sense of he was bitten by a spider and now he can climb on walls. Batman is very, very resourceful. He has a tool for everything, and is effectuating justice. I think maybe Black Panther is along those lines. However, I don't know if I saw Black Panther again. And you have to remind me, and please be specific about that scene in the movie when. But I'm just struggling to recall like him effectuating justice in the movie. In the movie, that is, right? So I thought that was interesting. Okay, and I'll tell you what I think that means in just a little bit. So let's go to the next one now. Blacks don't have any power over whites. Traditionally, this is true, at least in the movie space, right? At least in the movie space. Traditionally, this is true. I mean, think about a movie you've seen where a Black person has told a white person what to do, without consequence. Very rare. Here's an example of how Black power is often subverted or just flat out subsumed. Here's an example. This is from the movie Poseidon, by the way.
She was in the nightclub.
We have people up there, Mr. Ramsey. I'm confident they're dealing with it.
You're confident? You can't reach them, can you? I mean, what if they're dead?
Then your daughter is dead too, and leaving this room won't help. Half the people here have families somewhere on board. Disaster scenarios. These folks start climbing all over each other trying to search the ship. They're going to get themselves killed.
How do I get up there, Captain?
Sir, I'm truly sorry, but you need to stay here.
How do I get up?
You may not leave this boat.
Excuse me?
I'm within my authority to compel you to stay, you know that?
No. Captain, I understand you have no choice. There's sick and injured people here. You need to stay with them. But I am going to find my daughter, and don't for 1 second think you can stop me.
So let's just do a quick review. The movie's called Poseidon. It's a Hollywood movie, so bear with me. It's a luxury ocean liner ship that apparently after a major wave does a complete 180-degree flip over. So now the ship is flipped upside down. And obviously it's not going to stay that way forever. So this is immediately after the ship got flipped. And so now people are, injured and confused and trying to figure out how to get to safety. So, you see we have Patrick Swayze, talking to the captain, Andre Brower. I'm sorry. Oh, you said, I'm sorry, Kurt Russell. All white people look alike. So you have Kurt Russell, saying, hey, how do I get my daughter? How do I get out of here? And so remember, the black male is the captain, as in captain of the ship. I mean, the only thing missing from this clip was, excuse me, N-word, right? Like who, like who are you? Like, I know you have your little captain outfit on, but who are you to talk to me and tell me what to do? That's what I saw. That's what I felt. You tell me if you saw something different. Oh no, Dr. G, he was being respectful. Okay, well, you and I have a different definition of respect. Let's just leave it at that. So essentially, you see, and not only that, but look very carefully, the visual cues. You see the blood on the captain's, collar. I mean, and he's holding his arm. I mean, the idea is that, even your 3-year-old, if your 3-year-old, nephew or something, if they had to choose between the two gentlemen on screen, like who's going to help lead them out? Well, it's Kurt Russell. He appears to be able-bodied, and he appears quite confident. Because when I say confident, I mean, think about this idea of, I'm within my authority to compel you to stay. You know that, don't you? No, that's too many words. How about get back? I'm the captain, next. I mean, what's all this dialogue? Think about next time you're on an airplane or an ocean liner ship. I was just on a cruise this past summer, right? The next time you're on an ocean liner ship with thousands of people, think about the next time you're going to go back and forth with the captain in an emergency scenario, right? You going back and forth with the captain, and the captain's like, well, please, will you listen to me? And you're like, you're like, sorry, I didn't feel power. I mean, I felt power from the white male, but the black male had power in theory. Right? He was the captain, but in actuality, he was undermined, right? Usurped and undermined, right? So, I think it's interesting to see how the movie Black Panther deals with Black power. And as we all know, we were quite impressed with our, this brother here is from Trinidad, actually, by the way. My queen, she's from Trinidad. So, anytime anyone from Trinidad is in the house, they know about it. So that's how I know about it. All right. So, there was obviously strength demonstrated by his clan, if you would. But again, does it rise to the same level of Thor, in terms of the hammer being able to, save the universe? I'm not sure. Right? I'm not sure. Because what I mostly saw, in terms of demonstration of power was black on black. Now, I just thought it was interesting. And again, Dr. G, listen, look, I'm wearing black. I am black. I love black. Yeah, I told you, I'm running out the theater. I don't have to explain it to you, right? I don't have to explain it to you. But at the same time, I'm just telling you what I like to see. I paid my money because, all my life, I haven't seen it. I would love to see black power on screen. And so what's so fascinating is I did see black power, but mostly when blacks were fighting other blacks, right? I mean, obviously there was a challenge match early on in the upper left-hand corner. Then again, when, Killmonger won. And then finally, I mean, the climax was, again, not Black Panther out, saving the bridge with the school children on it or what have you, but basically fighting another black male, right? In the deep crevices of a train shaft, or a mining shaft, and again, and if you've been to South Africa, those mining shafts have been quite perilous for many Black workers who had been abused and exploited. I don't think that's the connection they're trying to make. But the point, though, is, and even when we talk about the climactic scene, right? I even had silver rhinos, rhinoceri. I guess that's the plural, rhinoceri. Running about, but it was mostly Black people fighting other Black people in the climax scene. So I just thought that was interesting. Now, again, it wasn't all Black people. It wasn't all Black people. I mean, let's not forget Lieutenant Ross, our white do-gooder, our white token, who ended up playing a very key pivotal role. Apparently, he had the know-how and wherewithal and how to fly the planes and shot down the planes containing the weapons that were leaving. And so before I forget, I'm absolutely the professor. Let me talk about that just for a little bit, because when we talk about Killmonger, I just want to get this straight. So, as a youth coming from Oakland, right? When we say Oakland, that's code for under-resourced, impoverished, Black neighborhood, right? Whether it be North Philly, Southeast DC, all of Detroit, no offense. But, right, so when we say Oakland, we know what we're talking about. So young Black kid from Oakland who is living the pain of racism. I mean, I don't know how to explain it to you. I mean, it's called racism, right? Structural, institutionalized racism. Right, he's a kid. He didn't ask for his school to be under resourced. He didn't ask for his neighborhood to look the way it did. Right, he was born into a larger scenario that had been in motion before he was born. So he internalizes this pain and resolves to create a solution. Some of you might call it revenge, but he wants a solution. I'm going to take all this technology and give it to my people so they can finally get justice or overthrow or revolution, whatever you want to call it. So, I mean, that's what I really want us to think about. Like, what was truly evil about Killmonger? Wanting justice for Black people. I mean, think about the arguments that came out during the summer of social justice after we all saw George Floyd's life sapped out of his, very lungs and before our very eyes, right? The conversation that summer was, what are these people doing to these neighborhoods? Why did they have to, protest in this way? And so, to many, it appeared to be very violent, haphazard, right? But at the same time, the question is, if I've attended the town halls, I wrote my letters to the senator that went unanswered. I've sent the emails. I called and left polite messages. I'm at the point where I'm about to explode, right? I mean, riots are language of the press, right? So it's a matter of perspective, is what I'm saying here. And another analogy I'll give you is that, if I'm, for whatever unfortunate reason, dangling by a rope, around my neck, you come over to help me, and I frantically am flailing and hit you in the face with my elbow. Am I being violent, or is it just I'm trying to breathe and survive? I appreciate you coming over to help, but I hit you inadvertently because I'm in a very critical situation. So I'm just really curious what you all think about what makes Killmonger a true villain. Because along those lines of Killmonger being the true villain, what I was saying earlier about Black Power, Black Panther, is that, I saw Black Panther, but I don't know if I saw Black Power, at least not Black Power over other whites on screen, right? I mean, think about the entire continent of Africa, right? What colonialization has done to the continent of Africa and the Caribbean, okay? And how about in real life, in real time, right? What has really actually happened in human history. And so the idea that you want to overthrow an oppressive regime that's exploited you for years and kick them out, like, now, if you want to do that, you're the one who's violent, or are you merely restoring order? I mean, again, we celebrate the fact that we threw tea in the, in the river back in the day and told the British, taxes, man, and we talk about taxes, right? So we celebrate that part. Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death, right? Kicking it strong. But yet, the question is, do we get the chance to see that same type of I mean, for those of you who love Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, we didn't see that epic type of battle of blacks over whites. I mean, think about Xhosa. He was an unsavory white character from South Africa. Actually, they actually said where he was from, because Wakanda is somewhere in Africa, right? He did die, at Killmonger's hands. But what would have been more interesting to me is if that was the climactic scene, like all of Xhosa's crew and all these white people who were trying to raid Wakanda for their resources and then being vanquished. And again, Dr. G, are you promoting a race war? This is terrible. What's wrong with you? Why do you want to see whites get punished on screen? That's not exactly what I'm saying. All I'm saying is that I've seen plenty of movies where the opposite has happened. I've seen whites vanquish my Latino brothers and sisters in these quote unquote drug trafficking movies. Strap up, we got to go in there and, do what we got to do. There was even a movie with, and again, you have to forgive me, William Hemsworth. It was released on Netflix where he was in India, the country. And the body count on that, I think, was like over 300, right? Just indiscriminately shooting, anyone in his way. I mean, think about Rambo in the Philippines, just shooting up everybody, right? Everybody of color. One white male shooting up everybody, and it's all good. He's the force of freedom. Rambo, we're rooting for him. But yeah, what's interesting is, and again, I mean, who knows? I mean, maybe because Wakanda is so technologically advanced, and vanquishing your opponent doesn't mean that you necessarily kill them. Maybe we have specialized weapons where I'm just neutralizing the opponent, and they just, have to like lay in the ground like freeze tag or something. I don't know. All I'm saying is that I saw Black Panther, but I don't know if I saw Black power, at least not over whites. All right, coming down the home stretch here. Number 8, vibranium. Vibranium represents an advantage. So I think the flip of vibranium was that, A, a lot of people think Africa is a country, and B, that everyone walks around, half clothed, chilling with lions, right? Just no buildings, no infrastructure, no computer, no internet, no modernity, no nothing, just lions, savannah, and in partial clothing, right? Unfortunately, that's the narrative that exists. So I think this whole vibranium idea of actually we're leading, we have a leading edge, we have an advantage with our technology, was speaking against this larger narrative, right? But was it a true advantage? Or shall we ask, did they maintain the advantage? Oh, and by the way, this is from the outtakes. So after the movie had concluded, if you stayed to watch the credits, like I did, then you would see this scene. So this is after the movie had concluded. T'Challa makes this announcement to the United Nations.
Sovereign ruler of the nation of Wakanda. And for the first time in our history, we will be sharing our knowledge and resources with the outside world. Wakanda will no longer watch from the shadows. We cannot. We must not. We will work to be an example of how we as brothers and sisters on this earth should treat each other. Now more than ever, the illusions of division threaten our very existence. We all know the truth. More connects us than separates us. But in times of crisis, the wise build bridges, while the foolish build barriers. We must find a way to look after one another as if we were one single tribe.
You have to excuse me. I'm from Philly. I'm not buying it. So again, do I not support Black Panther? That's not what I said. I just said I'm not buying this part. Okay. So finally, Black people have an advantage. It's called vibranium, technology advanced. And what do we do with it? We give it away. No. Sorry, I'm not buying it. Sorry. We finally have an advantage. We're going to give it away. Really? That's how capitalism works? Have you heard of this cat named Bill Gates? Bill Gates. You heard of him? Cat who got divorced not too long ago up in Washington. Microsoft, right? So he's the founder of Microsoft. So basically everyone's listening to my voice knows who this cat is because he's used Microsoft, or you know someone who's used Microsoft, whether Excel, Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, you name it. One of the reasons why Mr. Bill Gates is a billionaire is because he made a product, had an advantage, and sold it for a fee. This is what he said. They wanted a computer in every desk in every home. Okay, that's great. But for a fee. It's called capitalism. For a fee. No, not we're going to give it all away. So all I'm saying is that part didn't jive with me. That did not jive with me. That one time we get an advantage, we give it away. What if we, I don't know, maintain that advantage and used it to leverage and negotiate? So that way, the city of Oakland could be adequately resourced or whatever the case may be. So as you can see, I wasn't feeling that part. Now, this last one, I think it's a little more close to home based upon recent current events. But, I just want to be very clear that because we do have a movie featuring a majority Black cast and, strong Black women, family dynamic, a healthy advertising budget, a healthy production budget, and healthy returns at the box office. That doesn't mean problem solved. I just want to be very, very, very clear about that. I'm very happy. I'm very encouraged, but it doesn't mean problem solved. So this idea that we're in a post-Panther society is one that we still need to challenge, right? It's not as easy as that. I mean, as we all know, we're still dealing with, these untimely departures, as I was referencing earlier, right? Untimely departures, right? I think, the thing about Amir Locke that really bothers me is this is the case in Minnesota that happened not too long ago where police were serving a no-knock warrant. Yes, it's as bad as it sounds. So it was in the early mornings before 7 a.m. What would you do if someone busts through your house, yelling and screaming, they got guns drawn? It's alarming. And so he was sleeping with a gun and, on the couch, which is his legal right to do. It's inside the home. He owns it. What you sleep with is your business, and what he slept with, that was his business. But for me, the gun wasn't the weapon. This was the weapon, the search warrant that was signed off, on this no-knock warrant, right? And obviously when you have other people with guns out in the public using them and not really having to answer the consequences. I know he cried on the witness stand, but we just have some work to do, right? So the bottom line is this for me, that I think multiple things can be true, right? So I do believe that this is absolutely a very powerful installment in Black cinematic history, right? I think that it was successful, and I think that it absolutely helps open the door for additional productions of a high caliber, right? Again, maybe I guess we should thank the Meteor Mans of the world. No, I'm just kidding. We should, but the point is that when it comes to Black Panther, I think that it debunked a lot of misnarratives about consumer behaviors and also about just the value and visibility of Blackness on screen. That being said, there's always room for improvement. It's the first iteration. Think about, the first cell phone that came out, right? Compared to what we have now. So, the individuals who weren't satisfied with the first and said, how do we improve it? Well, thank you. Now we have, iPhones, as opposed to, the flip phone things that, that we were carrying around that, you couldn't even sit on in your back pocket. So, what I'm saying is, if anyone's listening and has the ability to work on this is, how do we continue to innovate and improve? Because, again, I've seen many a movie where, people of color have been vanquished on screen. And so if it's a free country and it's a fair country and it's equal opportunity for all, I don't see the problem on why I can't have Black people, depicted as triumphant over, whites on screen for whatever reason, right? Again, and if Hollywood studios are afraid to do so, I think it speaks to this larger idea about wanting to placate, a majority white crowd that is still afraid to deal with, images being challenged in their minds. So, one of my theories I'm developing in future works is this idea of, you heard it here first, psycho-segregation, where physically we no longer are in the strict segregation stage in terms of individual body placement. There's no color bench versus white bench, although neighborhoods are still very much segregated, even though you're free to move wherever you want as long as you have the financial resources. Yeah, okay, sure. And schools are segregated still, and and churches, right, are segregated still. Although we see signs and glimpses that there are hints of change on the horizon. But I think, just like Hollywood, what I wrote about in my last book, Black Oscars, I call it the Hollywood third rail, where we have yet to truly see, a Black male intimate with a A-list actress. And if you're saying Save the Last Dance, that is a negative. Julia Stiles, not an A-list actress, y'all. I'm sorry. And that movie was made like 20 years ago. Let's come up with something new. If you're thinking of Will Smith and what was it? Focus. Margot Robbie was not an A-list star at that time, and it's interesting how she's Australian and not American. That's another side point. But the point being is this: I think there's room to grow. I think there's still room to grow. So I'm excited to see next week's rendition, because based upon the trailers I saw, I think we see hints and flashes of a bit more to technology. I'm still curious whether there's a nemesis, right? And that's what I was getting at as far as with the first movie. It was really black on black. I mean, there was no clearly defined nemesis. There was that closet character who was unsavory, but he didn't last the whole movie. He died within the first third. So Killmonger was, like, I guess, the true villain, if you would. But in terms of like this other larger nemesis, or community at the Black Panther saving, I'm not sure how they're going to do it. But I'm curious to see how they improve upon the first model, because I think many audiences, white, black, purple, or whatever, deserve to see Black power on screen. And finally, just to show that I'm not, just being, curmudgeonly or cantankerous like the two older Muppets in the balcony. I just want to say something real quick, that I do think it's possible to change over time. I do. I mean, I study change over time as a historian. And just like I was critical of the points I mentioned to you earlier about Black Panther, about no Black power, and why are you giving away vibranium? While I was critical about those two chief items, I was also, am still very critical of Tyler Perry, in many of his works. I've written about it. I'm published on record, criticizing Tyler Perry, particularly The Family That Prays. I had a really big problem with that movie in terms of the juxtaposition of, again, white director, writer, producer, and the juxtaposition. If you look at The Family That Prays, of the white family versus Black family, I don't know how he can how he can justify that. But that being said, ladies and gentlemen, have you seen A Jasmine's Blues? Listen, I just want to be put on the record that this movie is excellent. Oh my God. It's on Netflix. Check it out tonight. I just can't even believe that it's Tyler Perry. It's excellent. Now, he says he could not have made this movie 10 years ago or 20 years ago. The story behind this is, because if you saw it or about to see it and you're like, oh my goodness, like this is like, is this Tyler Perry? The reason why it's so different from some of his not some, many of his other works, on TV and in the studio, is that here's the story behind it. It was written with a different frame of mind. Tyler Perry was an aspiring artist. I mean, he was out in his luck, as we all know the story, homeless and living in cars. And so he really wanted to break into the playwriting business at first. He went to go to a play by August Wilson, and August Wilson was actually there and actually was like doing a little Q&A afterwards. Tyler Perry resourcefully got backstage, got with August Wilson, and had a private audience with him. He says August Wilson was very gracious, was very kind, didn't shoo him away, gave him some advice. And he said he went home that night inspired and wrote the screenplay. So that's the frame of mind he was in when he did this. And it shows. I mean, it's a completely different universe. So if anything, party people, this is all connected because to the extent that we continue to patronize and support high quality Black productions, I'm not into doing it just because it's Black, if it's whack, it's whack, but, my hope is that the movie next week will be excellent. Will be another installment to keep moving the chain forward. And my hope is that, if you all continue to patronize and support movies like A Jasmine's Club, if anything, we'll see more productions like this, as far as whether from Tyler Perry himself, or from others who are like, oh, because think about it, everyone loves a winner. And so when people see something or a formula that works, oftentimes people wish to duplicate or emulate. And so I don't want to say too much because I don't want to ruin it for those who haven't seen the movie, but I think it's worth your time. I think it's worth your time. And so when you talk about leveraging the film space as a way to augment the dignity and respect that we have for one another, this is a very powerful medium, because remember what I said, movies are shown all over the world. TV shows are popular, magazines can also be highly visible, but nothing penetrates the global market like a mainstream movie. Before you even step foot over in Thailand, people have seen your image, based upon American movies. And so to the extent that we finally are able to point at works that reflect the breadth of our humanity. And again, it's not to say that artists must feel the burden to only produce positive films. Again, I myself as a historian am not running to the theater to watch movies about enslavement and Black people being tortured. So because that also happens. So I'm not saying that every movie we make, we must feel the burden of making it historical, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, I don't know about you, but I just know how I try to live my life on a daily basis with dignity and respect. That's all I'm trying to do. I look up in the mirror. I like that guy I see. I have to. Who else do I have? I love him. I love the fact that he came from a beautiful Black woman. He came from a beautiful Black man, married for 35 years, right? The guy in the mirror I see, father of 2 beautiful Black children on this planet, married to the Queen. Understand what I'm saying? Just celebrated 25 years this past summer. I mean, why wouldn't I want to see more of that image reflected? Why wouldn't I? Right? I mean, think about it. I went to go see the movie 42. Chadwick Boseman actually was in that movie with my father. We walked out of that movie. It was dark, so I'm not sure, but nearly in tears. It was dark. I couldn't tell. Nearly in tears. And and the funny thing is, when we got to the car and finally calmed down, we were like, what? I mean, because we just felt so invigorated, and inspired. We were like, what? This is how white brothers and sisters feel every weekend. I mean, every time they go to the movie, I am master. I can kill dragons. I can ride a dragon. Really? Wow, that's amazing. You can ride a dragon. You can ride a dragon and tell it with your human commands how to breathe fire. I'm not even talking about House of Dragon. What about Jurassic World? You got my man, what's the homeboy's name? You know what I'm talking about. No, he's on a bike telling dinosaurs what to do. He's not even dragons, but dinosaurs. I mean, yeah. I mean, if I was white going to the theater, I would feel pumped up too. That's why if you're black and at the meeting, you say something, you know, they all down your throat telling you what to do because they feel that power, because they see it. I'm starting to sweat, y'all. Let me calm down. Let me calm down. Let me calm down. Let me calm down. I'm starting to sweat. This is unbecoming. It's unbecoming. So that's all I'm saying, y'all, is that it's more than just a movie. That's all I'm saying. So let me conclude with this. Speaking of movies, I want to leave you with a movie clip that still gives me chills and hopefully speaks to you as well. Black director.
Anybody know who Willie Lynch was? Anybody? Raise your hand. He was a vicious slave owner in the West Indies. The slave masters in the colony of Virginia were having trouble controlling their slaves, so they sent for Mr. Lynch to teach them his methods. Keep the slave physically strong, but psychologically weak and dependent on the slave master. Keep the body, take the mind. I and every other professor on this campus are here to help you to find, take back, and keep your righteous mind.
Whew. My people, my people, my people. So I'm very appreciative of those who took time to listen to this dialogue, and whether you agree with it all or not. I mean, just the idea that we're in dialogue and in conversation, I think, is most important. I want to encourage you, if you're listening, watching, to keep fighting the good fight to free your mind. To free your mind. When I look at this movie clip, I feel the power, because it feels like the person who made this scene truly loves and cares about people, Black people specifically. And yes, it's because it was directed by Denzel Washington, and it's based upon the true story of the Wiley College debate team from Texas that many white schools were fearful of debating because they didn't want to lose in public. And so, again, that's based upon a true story. And so, nothing wrong with that necessarily. But what I like about Black Panther is pushing us to the realm of fantasy. Remember I talked about psycho-segregation? Why is it that everything that we do always has to be keep it real? Like, we have imaginations as well. And so that's what I truly mean by free your mind, to be able to tap into the boundless expanse of your imagination and envision a world, whether it be Wakanda or, here on planet Earth, right? How about heaven here on Earth? We all got to go. So why can't you enjoy it while you're here? Why do, right? What's wrong with that? So to the extent that we can free our minds and support one another, on that quest, I think would be important, because we are made in God's image, and Harriet Tubman was famously said, that's her, by the way, on the lower right-hand corner. She once famously said, because, she freed almost 300 people, making 19 trips. I mean, that's just on foot. I mean, it's just amazing. But she once famously said, but I would have freed more people, but only if I could have convinced them that they were slaves. So with that, party people, I would love to entertain a couple of questions, dialogue, what have you. But for me, I just want to encourage you all out there to enjoy the wonderful world of Wakanda and all that has to bring. Rest in peace to Chadwick Boseman. Hopefully he is in that fantasy, beautiful, idyllic space that, we'll all be seeing him soon. But in the meantime, while we're here on planet Earth, let's continue to keep fighting that good fight. So I appreciate you for thinking critically.
All right. Thank you so much for that presentation. Let's dive into some questions. So one of the first questions I had for you was, as we're talking about this film and its history as what was called a cultural phenomenon, why is it a cultural phenomenon for Black Panther to have been successful? Or why is the celebration of Black culture something that is seen as phenomenal in the broad landscape of American culture?
Yeah, I mean, because actually, in many ways, Sister Khara, it's no secret that Black culture is popular, right? Or shall we say, is digestible. Like I'm leaving tomorrow for a conference in New Orleans, and if I go to the fancy clubs, I'm going to see nothing but white people in there. I mean, in terms of them knowing that, Blacks produce music and food that they want to be a part of and want to access. So that's never been a secret. I mean, think about back in the day, like the Cotton Club, how the performers would be performing in all white segregated spaces, right? Couldn't even eat or get a drink at the bar at the same spaces. But so in other words, there was always this dynamic. And if you like read the book, like, Native Son, that this idea that, they went to the Black part of town, that's what kind of got bigger in trouble, that he was, the white female that, I think it was Mary Dalton, wanted to go to the Black part of town and kind of, touch that culture. So that has never been a secret that Black people, again, as I said earlier, are humans too. And as humans, we're capable of extraordinary and amazing, feats, right? As human beings on this planet, we're capable. So that's never been a secret. I think the phenomenon comes in this idea of it being on this public mainstream stage, right? Because mainstream America and capitalism works by different rules. And maybe the first iteration where we had like this idea of celebrated mainstream Black culture was the Cosby Show. That was a cultural phenomenon. But notice how in so many ways it still spoke to this idea of what many whites were familiar with as far as nuclear family, professionals, who are living upper middle class lifestyle, right? So, oh my God, that resonates, I mean, think about when you watch a television show like Friends or Sex and the City, like, are people working? Like, what are they doing? They're always like eating in these nice fancy spots. But it's like, what are they? So that kind of like resonated with them, with that audience. And that became this cultural phenomenon. So fast forwarding to now, I mean, there's just a huge dearth. Again, that's just disrespect. We had Meteor Man in between, but the idea is that, there's this huge dearth. And for this to cross over onto the mainstream public street. So it's not a matter of, I feel like being daring and I'm just in the mood for jazz tonight. No. I mean, this is just, kind of like the idea of, even if you didn't see the movie Frozen, you heard about it. I think this is one of the first times in a long time where we had that type of fever pitch for something that was definitely Black facing, right, through and through, right? Again, we talked about Lieutenant Ross and, there's a couple other white characters in there, but it was no secret that this was going to be a Black thing. So again, I think it's just a matter of many forces in mainstream America just being skittish and apprehensive about the financial viability of putting on a Black face to campaigns, because again, when that does happen, there's typically repercussions. I don't know if you remember the Cheerios commercial that was controversial. No, the Cheerios commercial. So there's a famous Cheerios commercial a few years back, right around the time actually when Black Panther came out, not too far before it came out, whereas a Black father sleep on the couch and he had Cheerios on his chest, and it appeared to be like a mixed race child who was like trying to wake him up, and then the mom was in the background. A lot of people had a problem with that. More mixed race families are happening. Well, we had mixed race families from way back in the day. Ask Strom Thurmond about his love child, right? Well, even your boy Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson, right? Had love children, right? So this idea, that's nothing new, but this idea that you're now going to make it public and prominent. Well, see that shifts matters a bit. And right now we're playing this game of, we kind of know it's out there, we kind of know it's true, but this idea that you now want to put it in a position where I can't avoid it. Well, that's the game that's being played, because as much as Hollywood says it's liberal and says it's willing to take risks, at the same time, ironically, is very conservative. When you have so much money at stake for each individual movie, what you want to do is do the same thing, but different. I mean, but it's the same thing. You want to make sure that it works. And so if you're going to invest, all this time, energy, and money, then you don't want to scare away, a large potential paying portion of your population. So when you talk about cultural phenomenon, I think the strategy of the 10, 11 Marvel movies beforehand was an absolute factor. If this had just come out on its own, I don't know if it would have achieved that same type of success.
As you were talking about the different experiences I think that people had in seeing this movie and kind of who this film was for. I'm remembering when I first saw the movie in theaters and had a both emotional and humorous moment happen very close to each other. I kept having very emotional responses to certain scenes in the film. Mm-hmm. And there was a young European-American couple sitting next to me. And during one of the scenes, I think it was one of the scenes in the ancestral plane, and I was just kind of crying a little bit during how beautiful it was. Mm-hmm. But I heard her leaning over to her boyfriend and whispering just loudly enough to be heard, "I don't think I'm getting this the same way other people are." Mm-hmm. And her boyfriend's response was, "Not everything is for you." And
did you get his phone number? Oh my goodness. Oh man.
That's an interesting response. But what strikes me is that, I mean, this was at once a movie that was for everyone who identifies as a fan of the MCU, and yet had a very different impact on audience members who were Black and coming to it from that experience. So I'm wondering your thoughts on how this film maybe uniquely approached cultural access, and the significance of such a uniquely Black story in the sprawling MCU universe.
Yeah, I think that's a really great anecdote. And I recall similarly the reaction from the crowd, particularly when his sister, I forget her name, when she said, pipe down, colonizer, or something along those lines. Like, I mean, because think about how cathartic that was. Because, and again, not all white people are bad and mean, but enough have been, historically, there's been a lot of bad apples. I mean, let's not confuse that at all. And so, typically for African Americans, they've had to contend with these power dynamics in person. White people telling them what to do. And so even though many of us are not in positions of power, or at least in positions of power where we're telling people what to do like that, there was this vicarious thrill of someone finally saying, "No, sit down." Like, yes, I've always wanted to say that at a meeting, but I didn't want to do it, because I didn't want them to think I was, being the angry Black woman. Those just things, right? So I think that's where that goes to my point about it's not just a movie. People go into the movie theater with different perspectives, and so therefore walk out of the movie theater with different feelings, associated with the movie, right? And so again, some movies are going to affect me differently than they would, another person. That's fair game. But in terms of the strategy of how to promote the Black culture inside, I think actually that was a tactical error. Since you asked me, I think that a little more could have been done to maybe cross-reference or even hint at the connection to the MCU Marvel universe. Just so that in the minds of my I don't know, rural Nebraska fan, moviegoer, like, oh, this is the Black movie, the Black Marvel movie. No. This is part of the Marvel universe. Like, I want people to understand that it's part of it, because, like you said, while it is definitely a movie featuring a Black protagonist, I am of the opinion that it's not just a Black movie. I don't know, what does that mean? Just like I don't say there's white movies. Why am I saying it's a Black movie? It's a movie. It just happens to have a Black protagonist. Because remember, how many movies have I seen, Sister Khara, featuring white protagonists? Do I need to answer that question? I mean, but again, but it's just a movie. Think about Gravity. Sandra Bullock's trying to come back to Earth. If you really wanted to impress me with diversity, you would have made her a sister or a Native American sister, or whatever like that. Because guess what? Everyone on the planet watching that movie can relate to, I want to get back to Earth. It was that basic. Like anyone could have played that role. But obviously it was personified through Sandra Bullock. And so I think when you talk about strategy, this idea that it's just a Black movie still, because we talk about this even on campus, this idea of the offices, like say ethnic studies or Office of Diversity and Inclusion, are they what we call ghettoized? Are they in that part of campus that's out of the way, or is it in the basement? So in other words, it's present, it's on campus, it's on the website, but in the mix, but not really of the mix. And my concern is psychologically that that many people still might file this away in just that Black movie space, as opposed to this is part of the Marvel comic universe. And then secondly, when we talk about the storyline, again, I thought there was another tactical error, this idea that somehow the pain from injustice makes you a villain. Like, again, I disagreed with that part. I think he was justified. On my record, I think he was justified in wanting to seek a solution. And he saw, through his access and birthright and bloodline, that the vibranium and what Wakanda had to offer, that's what he saw as a solution, right? So I think for some who don't have a strong maybe base in history, because remember, we're still arguing about critical race theory, right? At least in the state of Texas. And so we can't assume that everyone necessarily goes into the theater with a strong base. My concern there is that some people might get confused over, oh wow, well maybe they did need to shoot down the planes, and yeah, he is a villain. I think it's a little more complicated than that. Now again, I don't advocate people like Killmonger just killing people. I don't advocate that. But the principle of I was victimized and I want to reconcile that. I don't have a problem with that. So in terms of writing, I still think, remember what I said earlier, it's the first iteration. Remember, they tried to do a lot in this movie. There's a lot riding on this. There's a lot of pressure. And so, so for me to give it like an 89 or 91, doesn't mean it's just because I'm not giving 100%, right? If I was like a judge in scoring, doesn't mean it's a fail, no. But I do see areas where strategically, that question you asked about how do you tell the story, the Black story, because you want to be true to the history, but at the same time, you don't want to be too heavy-handed. It's not a documentary, right? We are watching it for entertainment, right? But at the same time, we just know that the history is just a part of it. And so how to find that right balance is hopefully something that more writers, black, white, brown, purple, whatever, will continue to tweak and figure out. As we see Netflix is, more diverse offerings, Hulu, we're seeing more diverse offerings. But remember, Khara, the stakes are lower, right? So I can experiment with, think about if I have a season, like 12 episodes for a season on Netflix. Remember, Netflix can kill production at any point in time. And I have more room to play with. Like, oh, maybe I'll develop this character in episode 3. That didn't work so well. Maybe I'll bring him back in episode 7 or, season 4. But see, with the movie, that's it. I got 120 minutes. I got 90 minutes. I got to make it work within that span. So I think it was quite ambitious what they endeavored to do. I think they did a good job. But this is the difficulty on how do we tell our story.
You've brought up Eric Killmonger a couple different times, and I'm still of the opinion that he was not a villain in this movie.
Oh, so you agree with me? Oh.
I 100% agree with you on that. I also have a theory that he's not really dead, but that's a whole other thing.
Okay, so see, you should have said so earlier. I thought I was on an island out there. I was like, oh man, I got to put myself out there. I was just trying to be true, but you see what I'm saying, though. You see what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, 100%. I did not see him as a villain, and what I found so interesting with his character is, and kind of behind the scenes, I was chatting with some folks from the production team, and we were just talking through, the background of the character of Killmonger versus T'Challa. is very similar to the juxtapositioning of a Malcolm X versus Martin Luther King. And one of the things that I find really interesting with Killmonger versus T'Challa and what you were talking about in terms of the potential power that Wakanda had, that by the end T'Challa decides I'm going to give it to everyone, is looking at Killmonger's initial goal was to take that power, take it back to his community, give it to his people, and bring them out of the suffering that they experienced. And so it's interesting because, I mean, I've always looked at it as a very positive thing that T'Challa's ultimate goal was, let's unify everyone. But there's a really interesting thing happening there, I think, when you switch that from, if Killmonger isn't a villain, and if his goal was actually a noble one to empower his people, is T'Challa somehow going against that empowerment by saying, well, let's just give everyone the same power on the same level?
Okay, I think they got the wrong person to lead this discussion, with me. I think you should have been in front of this camera a long time ago, because what you just said is so very powerful in that you're making me consider why this movie might have been so digestible, right? In terms of when you talk about cognitive dissonance, this fits with this narrative of, like you said, the Booker T. Like, oh, we love Booker T because he just wants to cast his buckets where he is. He doesn't want anything from me. If anything, I'll give him the money so he can stay where he is on his side of the tracks, right? I mean, that was the thing. Again, now to his point, he was a bit more subversive than a lot of people give him credit for. And God bless, Tuskegee is still standing. I mean, I haven't found the university, so I need to be quiet. He did. That being said, there was a reason why his message was palatable, right? Separate as the five fingers and the hand, that sort of deal, the Atlantic Compromise. So this idea that T'Challa was keeping the peace or the status quo, that is very fascinating. Because think about it. If Killmonger succeeds, it's no longer an action movie. It's a horror movie. It's a horror. Black people got weapons and intelligence. What am I going to do? And they have righteous indignation. That's the problem. Yeah, no, I mean, no, again, I'm not just, coming in your crib and, knocking you upside the head just to, be rude. It's because we have a debt to settle. I mean, no. I mean, some people call it reparations, but the fact of the matter is that, let me just say this real quick. I know time is winding down, but we're, I'm East Coast. So we're in the subway. We're in a train. We call it a train. We're on a train, right? Sister Khara, okay, work with me. You stand up next to me. I get on the train. I step in your foot. What would you expect me to do?
Apologize.
Excuse me. My bad, sister. So what happens then if I step in your foot and then I'm like this, just looking at you? Then what are you thinking?
I better move.
So the problem is, if I'm just staring at you and I don't say anything, that means I failed to acknowledge the idea that you and I made contact in space, and I invaded that space, whether accidentally or not. The fact of the matter is that I made contact that you weren't expecting. And, and it could be injurious. I mean, I could have you could have open toe shoe. I could have hurt your toe. I could have scuffed your shoe, right. But the fact that I just didn't acknowledge it, that's when the problem begins. All I had to do. So if I said, oh, my bad, sister, then, I mean, chances are, what would you do if I said my bad? What would you do?
Be okay. Be good. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not talking about stepping on feet on a train. I'm talking about 400 years of chains, right? From psychological to physical to economic. Let's not forget the economic chains that we're still looking to break, right? I mean, come on. I mean, it's basic. I mean, no, it's basic. I mean, even if I were to get a job at Chipotle, I expect them to pay me for my time. And this idea for over 250 years, you're not going to pay anybody anything and torture them while you at it. No, there's a debt to pay. And then again, when I say debt, I know that sounds like I don't know, insurrection. No. I'm just speaking in a language that hopefully many people understand, that there's been an injury and there's been no acknowledgement, not even in my bad. Not even in my bad. So I think white people know this. I know they know this. I know they know this. And so that's where the whole tears and the guilt thing comes in, and that, the last thing that you can do is get upset because, people just shut down and, they can't deal with it. But the fact of the matter is that we're going to have to reconcile at some point in time. I mean, the history is the history. I didn't make it up. And so again, and that's why I'm wondering psychologically whether, I thought it was an interesting litmus test as to, are we ready for true diversity in that respect, right? And I don't know, time will tell. But you make a very powerful point about, if Killmonger was successful, that is most likely the worst case scenario for many people who may have voted for Trump. Mm-hmm. Although that's exactly what they did. I mean, they literally ransacked the Capitol out of anger, right? Mm-hmm. But they're so afraid that that's what we're going to do, right? That's what we're going to do, right? We're out in the street saying, oh, you shouldn't kneel on the neck of unarmed, handcuffed people. We're upset about, of course we're upset about that. And so this idea of, according to your Constitution and your rules, you have a sanctioned election, and now you want to talk about stealing, and then you go to the Capitol like a bunch of rabid. I'm still processing what happened, but I guess it's not a big deal because people are getting off of probation.
So last question, is it a problem that with this film being very symbolic of Afrofuturism and kind of the pinnacles of, or the greatest achievements of Black culture, is it a problem that that sort of potential and achievement is relegated to the realm of fantasy?
I'll say no, and here's why. Khara, I mean, all's fair in love and war. Mm-hmm. And so I think maybe for yourself, or maybe myself, oh, I saw Wakanda Forever. Now I can go start my own business. I mean, there may not be that direct correlation necessarily, maybe not. But there's a possibility that for some, that's exactly what that might mean. Just the idea that seed was planted of, oh, Black people are in space, Black people are free, Black people are flying all around. Oh, okay. I mean, that might mean something to somebody. And so I can't discount that. I don't want to take away somebody else's dream, mm-hmm. Or the possibility of, somebody else's seed germinating. So my whole thing would be, can we get a both and, right? Mm-hmm. So in addition, because here's what's interesting. In terms of Blacks and Afrofuturism, so we have Wakanda Forever, we have Black Panther. How many movies dealt with Afrofuturism during that 4-year span? Mm-hmm. I mean, you see what I'm saying? So it's not like the floodgates have opened, right? So I would love to see more within the fantasy realm on screen. I mean, hopefully we'll have just more random, movies of, so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. And we'll see more of that, and we'll see more people with access and opportunity, in real life. Because I'll conclude with this. I've always said, and again, you check the receipts, ask any of my past students. I've always said the cure for cancer exists. Mm-hmm. But Sister Khara, you know where it is? You know where it is? You know where I believe it is?
Where?
Somewhere in the ghetto. Mm-hmm. See, it exists, but it's somewhere in the ghetto. And guess what? We never gonna find it until we all have access and opportunity, right? Malik is brilliant as I don't know what. I mean, if you're able to spray paint upside down in the middle darkness, in 2 minutes, your name, you're talented. You're able to calculate. It's just you haven't had access to $1 million lab, right? And again, you have to excuse me, but being a professor, I work with a lot of people who indeed are very intelligent. Not everyone. I mean, not everyone impresses me. I'm sorry. Not everyone, but they just have access and opportunity. They're in the mix. And so all I'm saying is there really are people with a lot of talent without access and opportunity. And once we as a society, not just Black, Indigenous people of color, but once we figure this out, I think we all win. We all stand to benefit if we operate at optimal capacity, right? I mean, isn't that the true spirit of democracy? Let the best idea win, right? Let the best idea win, right? But I still think that we, have to remember what Du Bois told us over 100 years ago. That the color line is still a very significant piece. And as much as we don't want to admit it, I received too many emails about how is this happening after George Floyd, that only confirmed that, I think, we still have some work to do, because it was shocking. It was shocking to my spirit, and I'm still disturbed, but it was not surprising, right? Just given, connecting the dots, everything else that's been going on. I mean, again, remember, I live in the Fort Worth area. I mean, Botham Jean, I don't know if I heard about him. He was shot in his own crib, eating ice cream. Atiana Jefferson shot in her own crib, playing video games with her nephew. I mean, remember, all this happened. I mean, we forgot about Ahmaud Arbery, right? I mean, all these names, right? Jonathan Gray. I mean, so I mean, and again, hashtag Black Lives Matter started on whose watch? Obama's watch. So just because we have a black face in a high place doesn't mean that we've solved the issue. So I appreciate Obama, and I appreciate him and Sister Michelle, producing on Netflix, movies like Descendants, right? But what I'm saying is, why do we have to stop there? If anything, we should be inspired to build and continue both on screen and off screen.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. G. It is always good to have you here. And thank you to our audience that joined us this evening. This was a wonderful conversation. I had probably 20 more questions that I could have asked you, but it just tells me that there's more conversation to be had, and we are here to have them. So until next time, to those that tuned in, thank you as always. And until our next session, go in grace.